Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday the 9th of December 2015, and joining me on this edition are Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
It's unacceptable that chocolate makes you fat, but I've eaten my share, and guess what?
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
I'll probably lose my citizen. For fuck's sake. I'll go with another one. I'll die unless you kill me.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Please don't interrupt me when I'm asking rhetorical questions.
8 days to go. There's just 8 days. Another podcast recording, and then we I don't know what we're going to talk about next week.
We're not going to talk about anything. You're just going to sit at the end of the microphone going, ah!
Well, no, because next week is before, but there's nothing being released at the cinema or anything like that, so God knows what we're going to talk about next week.
Well, suggestions please, listeners. What
Yeah, answers on a postcard.
In the absence of news or anything else going on, what are we to talk about?
I don't know. We could talk about how excited we are for the Force Awakens.
Idle speculation.
Isn't that every week?
Yeah, but idle speculation specifically about Star Wars.
Oh, right, okay.
Although we've been confirmed now, no Jar Jar, unfortunately.
Disappointing. I think
And no post-credit sequence a la Marvel, which is good, because obviously we wanted to be stylistically the same as the other films, so that makes sense.
Were we expecting Jar Jar?
Well I think
based on that Reddit theory,
Yes.
it was time for him to return and be Sith Lord of everything.
his true nature was going to be revealed. In fact, it had been him behind the scenes pulling. He was the Phantom Menace at the end of it all.
Yeah, that was the thing. What was the Phantom Menace?
Oh, God knows. I mean, that film makes that film doesn't make any... Phantom Menace, is it meant to be Sidious or Palpatine or... It would have made a lot more sense if it was Jar Jar.
So, yeah. But you see, the thing is, though, Lucas would say that was my idea right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's like, he'd rewrite history.
Well, he can't anymore. Doesn't own it. Apparently, when he sold Lucasfilm, he provided Disney with outlines for episodes 7, 8, and 9, plus further episodes and ideas for standalone movies, and Disney threw it all out. And said, no thanks. So we can be thankful for small mercies.
Yeah, well, hopefully, if this Indiana Jones 5th film is to be cut, hopefully Spielberg will do the same thing. Nah, sorry, George, not interested. You're retired, mate. Go away you go.
It's kind of sad, isn't it? Because once upon a time he was a really
no.
filmmaker.
I don't think he was. Steve. I think that was just his mates, bigging him up. I think he was just bloody lucky with Star Wars. The right film came along at the right time, and he made a success out of it. And there wasn't all this backstory and all the rest of it. And he wasn't a talented filmmaker the way that Coppola was trying to make out he was, and all the rest of it. I don't buy that now. Sorry. Because I don't see any evidence of it. Because even in his heyday when he was making the Star Wars films, what other stuff did he make? Willow and Howard the Duck.
American
Case
Graffiti.
Closed.
American Graffiti is a great film.
That's a good film.
THX 1138 is genuinely interesting, albeit a bit of a downer. I think he had talent, but he ended up, instead of becoming a filmmaker, he ended up being a businessman. Hang on. There's a difference between having talent and being a super talented filmmaker, which everybody tries to make out he was at one point. Which don't buy it. I think you're right though. That if you think about it, I mean, there's different opinions here, but a lot of people think that The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie. It's the one that he had the least to do with.
Yeah.
He was, he wasn't the producer, he wasn't the director, and he wasn't the writer, and that probably says it all, really.
So anyway, 8 days to go. I can't wait. And looking back through all the trailers that have been released, are we expecting another one this week?
There's been a couple. There's been I don't know if you noticed, Phil. There's been a couple more brief trailers. There's been an international trailer released, and also a couple of behind-the-scenes things as well. There's tons of stuff coming out. I mean, it's mostly the same footage, but I watched something on Saturday, I think it was, and it was someone had taken all the footage that had been released in every conceivable way so far, put it all together. It ran for about 8 minutes. 8 minutes or so, and you put the footage together in context of the scenes they come from, rather than as a trailer, but just as the scenes.
What they think might be the context.
Yeah, but you can see certain scenes obviously taking place on an ice planet, for example, in summer and forest and this sort of stuff. So you put them together, and I've still got no idea what the plot is, but it looked awesome.
Are we fixed on what the Empire now called? Because obviously they're not the Empire now, are they? They're something like New Order, isn't it?
First Order or something like that, isn't it?
First Order.
Do they just blast around the galaxy playing True Faith?
New Order would be a little bit too fascist, deliberately fascist, I think. Or maybe not. Joy Division.
Joy Division.
Actually, given where that title comes from, that's very, very dark. They've gone very dark if that's the case.
Yes,
I just like the idea of just everything in that film playing to Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Yeah.
That would be the
Monday.
ultimate bait and switch. Yeah, there's a John Williams score. Actually, no, there isn't.
It's just Blue Monday on repeat.
I'd still be quite keen on that. I've got to be honest.
I know you would, Ed. Actually, you weren't around when we were talking about Mr. Robot, the new series on Amazon. You would love the score to that, the soundtrack to that. It's very...
Well, hopefully the score is available separate to the actual program itself, because the word that keeps cropping up from people that are watching it is like bleak. So
yeah, but really interesting and gripping, because I haven't stopped thinking about it, to be honest. It plays on so many things that did that happen, or is that in his imagination? And because he's schizophrenic, you don't know if what he's narrating to you actually happened or is part of one elaborate, made up thing in his head. So it's there's not a lot of humour in it so far, but I don't think it needs that, and I don't think it needs the light relief at the minute. I think it's because the subject matter is quite heavy, but I think you'd love the soundtrack because it's very electro.
I'll see what I can find. I mean, obviously, as it's on Amazon, it would require my son to stop watching Peppa Pig on loop for me to get anywhere near my Fire TV stick. But yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, it's well worth it. At least having a look at the first episode. If it's not grabbing you, then so that's how I was. This what's the other one? The Man in the Castle, or what's it called?
The Man in the High Castle.
That one I'm really interested because I saw the pilot for that, and I've read the original Philip K. Dick book. And that's got a really interesting premise about an alternative existing alternative universe where Germany and Japan won World War II and America is separated between the two occupying forces. But they find a film of a world where they didn't win the world. In other words, our world where they didn't win World War II. And it's quite an interesting premise. And
I saw that in the trailer, and that was the bit that hooked me when she finds the film, and you think, oh, no, this could be interesting.
Yeah, no, I think so. I enjoyed the pilot. I thought it was really good. So. Worth checking out, definitely. I should probably, when I find time, Christmas, maybe I'll watch it over Christmas. Yeah, because too much. There's just too much to watch at the moment.
Yeah, well, you're not doing any work over Christmas, are you? And you've taken 2 weeks off. I don't know why you've taken 2 weeks off, but yeah.
It's knockout week for MasterChef as well, Steve.
Yes, quite. Yeah, this week's just too much on. There's just too much.
That's why I haven't had any reviews yet. That's why it is.
No, you're not going to get much this week, are you?
I supplied you one this morning.
Yeah, that's true. I did deliver one this morning, the Pioneer audio player.
Has he spelled up correctly?
Mostly, I think.
You've got the bloody the main picture at the top wrong again, Ed.
It's a photo of the unit.
Yeah, it was a photo of the unit with its back off, so you can see the guts of it. That's not really going to help.
Oh, well, just piss about with them.
The photo that you use for that is the one that's used for the product database. So you want an image that actually typifies the product.
Well, all right. There are some other images. I thought it was quite a good image to start it with, but okay, fine. What do I know?
You're being too artistic here. Just do what you're told.
too autistic, you say?
And welcome along to a new segment of the AVForums podcast called Admin.
What's Ed done wrong this week? Yay!
Well, Ed, obviously you sound fine here. I'll know when we get into the edit whether you do sound fine, and maybe the listeners can comment, but you got a new headset on. It's a Sennheiser one, and I've got to say you sound pretty good.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I don't know how I sound because I've got both ears covered with this headset. So I, as far as I'm concerned, sound like I've got an incredible cold. But if people are happy, then I'm happy. And the main advantage is that unlike the other microphone, which is fixed position, or rather not, it was depends where I'm holding it. This will move with my head, hopefully meaning that even if I'm being a bit animated, I'll stay relatively consistent. If it works, it works. Yeah, or just make sort of desperate gargling noises, one or the other.
Well, I thought that was your contribution, isn't it?
Well, for the most part, yeah. But...
Mark, tell us what we can win in the competitions.
Okay, we've got a Blu-ray available, which is Mission Impossible Rouge Nation. No, it isn't. You've made that go in my brain. I mean to say
Every time I see Rogue now, I think Rouge.
It's your fault. Rogue Nation on Blu-ray, and that's open to active members and closes 15th of December. And then we've got a rather nice prize, courtesy of Scan, and this is a Yamaha RX A 3040 AV receiver.
Ed reviewed it. I'm sure he can give you his thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, I obviously my review's there to read. It's also been resident in the house ever since. That was
Is this the competition prize?
It's not that you can rest assured you're not winning the one. But if you wanted any sort of encouragement that this is a tough piece of kit, yes, it's been in the house. It's had any number of different things connected to it. My son has pushed various buttons and the volume control and the big metal flap that hides some of the other controls. They've all been pushed and prodded and attacked day in, day out. It still works exactly the same as the day it first went in. It is one beautifully built.
So at least you haven't had regurgitated food pushed into the RCA sockets and anything like that.
Well, he'd have to get around the back for that. Everything that he can get hold of has a sort of light smearing of, it's a combination of sort of saliva and whatever he was eating at the time, and it sort of dries to a sort of
milk,
flaky crust. But
yeah,
it's wonderful. It's parenting encapsulated, but it's taken all of that in its stride. It's been a brilliant piece of equipment.
And that one closes on the 30th of December.
Oh yeah, sorry, we're still talking about a competition.
Actually, what we were talking about.
Yeah. Any previous winners, Mark?
Nope, not one.
Nope.
No, not this time.
Okay. Sorry, I need to scroll down, and it wasn't scrolling down.
You didn't know what was next.
Yeah,
it's like the auto cue for Ron Burgundy.
Yeah,
Phil
well,
can't
that's
see
it.
it's not like that.
Yeah, if I can't read it, then I ain't saying it. Right, so let's move on to some hardware news. Cause I know that's coming up because it's in bold. So this is a new section of the podcast after admin. Right, so we've been looking at some different bits and pieces over the last week in terms of review kit. We've also been, some of us have been writing articles. I actually wrote this a little while ago, Steve. We've just been waiting for the right time to put it up. And towards Christmas, when people are looking at possibly buying a new TV, and we've got things like Black Friday and so on, where TVs are being sold cheaper than normal, and we're getting to the end of the year, so manufacturers are starting to discount last year's lines in preparation for next year. People have been asking the age-old question, what's the difference between an LED TV and an OLED TV? And this is something we've discussed on the podcast on numerous occasions, and it's something that we highlighted a couple of years ago when Samsung got into trouble because they were calling their TVs LED TVs, and there's no such thing. It has an LED backlight, and they were naming it should be LED LCD TV is the correct terminology. But it does confuse the consumer, and of course OLED, unfortunately, has LED in its name.
Yeah.
And it does get confusing for the consumer out there because, well, really, they are two completely different technologies.
They couldn't be really less alike if they tried. In fact, if anything, OLED is more like a plasma television in the sense that it's self-illuminating in the same way that plasma is, and therefore it has more in common with that technology than it does with what is effectively an LCD television you just pointed out, Phil. And, this confusion, I mean, there's probably, I can't think of any other industry where there's more, jargon and acronyms than there is in the consumer electronics industry. And you can forgive the consumer for often becoming confused by all these different terms and terminology. And the confusion basically stems from, as you say, Phil, going back about 5 years when they first started using LEDs as an alternative backlight to CCFL on LCD televisions. And it was Samsung did it first, but I mean, everyone else has kind of piled in since then. But they were the first people to do it. They were calling them LED TVs in order to make them appear as if there's some sort of incredibly new technology. What they actually are is an LCD television with an LED backlight, but that obviously isn't very catchy. LED TV did catch on, and it was quite catchy, and people bought into the whole marketing spiel. And even though they were wrapped across the knuckles by the Advertising Standards Authority and told not to do it, they continued to do it and just pay the fine, I assume. And so people have been buying these TVs for the last 5 years, buying their LED televisions and then thinking, I got this brand new TV and it's this new technology. And then along comes OLED, which is a genuinely new technology. And they're thinking, well, how's that different from the one I've just got? And hence the article. And basically, as you've just said, Phil, an LED television is really an LED LCD TV. So it's an LCD panel with an LED backlight. The light shines through the panel. The panel's pixels open and close to block out the light, and that's how the image is created. Now, of course, because the light is being shone through the panel and it can't block out all the light, that's why LCD televisions generally, and LED LCD TVs as well, don't necessarily deliver particularly good blacks. They can deliver reasonably good blacks, and particularly if they're using a VA panel, that they can deliver quite good blacks. And obviously there are other things they do, things like local dimming to help improve the black level performance, but it's not its strong point. OLED, like plasma, is self-illuminating, which means when you turn off that pixel, It's black. It's really black. It's blacker than plasma because there's no afterglow. It's black. And that's one of the big differentiating factors between the technologies. One self-illuminating and one delivers incredibly deep blacks natively. And effectively, if you think about local dimming as being different zones, on an OLED TV, there's, if it's a 4K TV, 8 million local dimming zones, each individual pixel, in fact. So that's one of the major differences between the two technologies. There are others, of course. It hasn't got a backlight, and therefore it has less layers to construct the panel with, so it's a much thinner. Although they can make LCD televisions pretty thin these days, but I mean, natively and inherently, OLED is much thinner. It's much more flexible too, which is why they initially started curving them when the first models were launched. 3 years ago? Samsung and Samsung and LG released curved OLEDs. Since then, Samsung in particular have also been doing curved LCD panels, which has somewhat confused the waters a little bit. And they're very energy efficient. They have better performance in terms of color performance at lower light levels because there's no bleed coming through from the backlight through the panel. So again, that's another area where they have a certain inherent strength. They're not perfect. Nothing's perfect, of course. But on the whole, I think we generally feel, having seen a number of OLED televisions now, that it's the technology of the future. It's a great technology that can deliver a stunning picture, and it will go from strength to strength. Hopefully, more manufacturers will eventually become involved in this market, because up to now it's basically been LG with, we've had a TV this year from Panasonic, but it's an LG panel. So hopefully more manufacturers will get involved, will support it, will invest in it, and it will become a proper mass market technology. And it's getting there. I mean, prices, I don't know if you noticed, but prices have been dropping like a stone in some of the stores. Yeah. There's some fantastic deals going on recently for OLED TVs. So that's it. That's what an OLED television is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously our audience are the main core audience are pretty up to speed with what things are in terms of LED and OLED. But another thing which tends to rear its head, Steve, is that because OLED costs a lot of money, people expect absolute perfection. And when it comes to TVs, whether it's an LED TV, a plasma, or an OLED, there's no such thing as perfection. Unless you're buying a broadcast standard monitor, which at 11 inches would set you back about £35,000.
Yeah, yeah, quite. I mean, regardless of what TV you select and technology you select at a consumer level, you're right. It's not being perfect. I mean, you can go back to even TVs that people still laud to this day, like the Kuro. It still had its issues.
Well, the CMS didn't work for a start.
CMS didn't work.
It's chroma sampling isn't there. It's just not very good at all.
You know, nothing's perfect. But
look back at CRT, and CRT's held with great fondness, but people tend to forget the geometry issues they used to have.
I cannot believe that people forget the geometry issues.
Yeah,
I mean, it was the reason I moved away from CRT in the first place. I mean, it was just watching a BBC News ticker get to the end of the screen and go, way, and just disappear off a completely random angle.
It's slightly ironic that we've kind of gone back to that now with curved screens. Well, in fact, in the other direction.
I won't be bothering myself, but yeah, I appreciate the irony of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that, and a great article that's on the homepage there, Steve. I mean, I think the slides which came, I believe, courtesy of LG.
Yes, they were from LG actually, who obviously are quite keen for people to be educated in terms of what the difference is. Yeah, but they are very simple diagrams and graphics that kind of very simply demonstrate what I'm talking about in the article.
Yeah, and they're not over exaggerated either. Where sometimes manufacturer produced stuff is exaggerated towards their product. It's pretty much fair enough down the line, those images, and they do help illustrate what it is that you're saying in the article as well. So I think the two work really well together. Right, so let's move on. We have been looking at some equipment, some of us longer than others. I've had the Sony for a while now, the Sony VW520ES projector, 4K native. The big thing between the 520 and the 500 is the fact that it does HDR. Everything else appears to be exactly the same, and myself and Steve had a long conversation going through the 500 and the notes that you had for the 500 and stuff, and we couldn't find anything else. Even the brightness is the same, so we couldn't find anything else between the 500 and the 520 other than HDR. So we got in touch with Sony and asked them to send us an HDR player, because one of the issues that you do have, unlike HDR TVs which have a built-in HEVC player which can take the HDR metadata and show it properly on screen, with a projector you have to feed the signal into the projector, and that means having a player attached to it. Now, we did try one of these Android boxes. Mark, you sent me up a Zedu X6, and we tried that by loading up the HDR clips. And unfortunately, the Zedu couldn't play back the HDR clips for whatever reason, couldn't read the metadata or whatever, it just wasn't reading them. So we asked Sony to send us this player, and it took three weeks?
Yes.
It's about three weeks for the player to turn up. It got here, brand new box, really excited on Friday night. Last thing on Friday night, it turned up about 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, because I thought I was giving up on it. I thought it wasn't going to turn up. Hooked it all up to the machine. It has Netflix 4K, and then it has a video player, and I was expecting it to be preloaded clips, HDR clips, and maybe even some preloaded movies like there are in the US with this player. Zilch. Nothing in it.
Yes.
Which really, I can't blame the PR people who were sorting it out, because they don't know what was on it, and maybe wires got crossed or whatever. But it's taken 3 weeks to look at this, and this just kind of highlights the issues, guys, about these new standards and getting things to play properly, and even getting things just to play so you can test equipment. There's no way at that moment in time on Friday night I was able to test the VW520. I have since been able to get 2 clips to play, HDR clips, via USB into this 4K player and then into the projector. And even that, it's not reading the metadata, so it's not switching HDR on automatically. You have to go into the menu and switch HDR on. And there's 2 different clips. One which is a wood fire burning, which sounds spectacular as it is. And the other clip is a Sony clip from one of the Cine Alta 4K cameras, which is a Japanese woman and her daughter on a boat in Tokyo Harbour, and you've got all the city lights behind them and so on in the lighting of the boat, and it balances out, so there's depth image and so on. But even with those clips with HDR switched on, something which you noted, Mark, with the stuff that you were watching on Amazon through one of the 4K HDR TVs, was that for some reason the gamma curve doesn't seem to work with some shots compared to others. It seems to get very washed out at 1 minute and then look absolutely spectacular the next. And the only reason I can think there is that there's something wrong with the metadata, or the projector's unable to use that gamma curve that their footage was shot in, or it just doesn't seem to be mature enough and working properly.
No, and even now there's no media players on the horizon sort of promising HDR support in the near future. I haven't seen anything at all. So that's for the next 12 months. Whether we'll see anything announced at CES, I don't know. But I'm not sure that the manufacturers are willing to go out on a limb and decide which form of HDR to support, because the chipsets might not support all forms of them, and the hardware decoding, etc.
Well, I specifically asked Sony via the PR to speak to one of the engineers to find out exactly what the projector accepts, and what I got back was it would accept CEA standardized, which I believe is HDR10. And it would also support BBC for broadcasting when that was finalised. It would be a firmware update, and that would be the 2 standards that the VW520. But you would think, if it's shot on Sony cameras and it's a Sony demo clip on a Sony player through a USB into a Sony projector, that it would work.
You would think that it would be in their interest to provide you, a reviewer, with some really knockout clips in order for you to be impressed when you're doing the review. At least, I don't know if you've seen the clips, Mark, but I got sent some clips by LG when I was reviewing the EF950 OLED TV.
Yes, I've got
and they looked
all those.
Awesome, awesome on the TV. It was really impressive. I thought, blimey, that looks good. But again, I tried the Little Life of Pi and Exodus clips that Samsung gave me for when we did the JS9500 review right at the beginning of the year, and that didn't look quite as impressive on the LG as the LG's own clip. So you're kind of wondering now, is it dependent on who's mastering it or where it's coming from? I mean, it's interesting that you say that the Sony projector does HDR10 and BBC log hybrid, when apparently Sony Pictures are going to be doing Dolby Vision on their Blu-rays. So that was the one thing that was specified in the email from the engineer was it does not support Dolby. Well done, boys. Nice to see you talk to each other again as usual.
It's a brave new world out there.
Well, I think this just perfectly highlights the issues that are continually ongoing. And now, when it comes to the point where we're trying to test this kit for members and tell members, what works, what doesn't work, and so on, and we're getting to the point where literally I had to go and have a number one haircut on Monday because I'd pulled so much hair out on the Friday night and over the weekend because I had a laptop fail on me as well over the weekend, which meant I couldn't do certain bits and pieces, and I was just having a nightmare. But I was just thinking, this is a Sony branded player, it's a Sony branded projector, and it was shot on Sony Cine Alta F55 camera.
And they own a film studio.
And you own a film studio. You would think that down that line it would work, and it just didn't work. It just didn't look very good.
So basically, Phil, aside from the HDR support, which kind of maybe doesn't work depending on what you're feeding it, and HDMI 2.0A inputs, it's a 500. It's
a 500, and I don't want to get down on it because I think it's a stonking projector. It really is a really, really good projector from last year. Up against this year's projectors, I think it's going to struggle. Especially at
$8,500, right?
At $8,500, and it's the only one in the Sony lineup that does HDR. And I think we've just come to the point where we don't know if it does HDR, because switching it to auto, it obviously isn't reading any metadata. Switching it on, it was working with some clips, it wasn't working with others.
I mean, it should automatically detect it, right? Isn't that
it should. Well, that's the whole idea,
that's
isn't it?
That's the way that LG and Samsung and other TVs have they detect the HDR, say HDR detected, and then go into whatever mode is appropriate.
Yeah, well, my whole understanding was it was it's basically a gamma curve. If we're using old terminology, I keep forgetting it. EOTF. I'm not going the long-winded.
Gamma does roll off tongue better than EOTF, doesn't
yes, it does a little bit, which is why I keep referring to the old-fashioned name, because I think it works. But my understanding was it just reads metadata, but for some reason these media players just will not play the clips, even though they're HEVC, because I've got other HEVC 4K clips which play fine, and then the stuff that I shot on the GH4, it plays fine. So normal 4K material, it plays that back perfectly well, and obviously you've got Netflix 4K as well, which on my new super fast broadband looks absolutely fantastic.
Got to slip that in there.
Yeah, I wonder when you're going to get round to that.
But yeah, I mean, it looks fantastic, and this projector at 520, really, really nice, but it's one upgrade, can't get it working. And I can only assess it on what we can get it working, and I think at 3 weeks and asking numerous questions, I think we've given Sony a fair crack of the whip to try and give us some stuff. So I'm going to have to write the review this week and publish it this weekend, and I can address it up. It doesn't quite work with HDR material, and at $8,500, and coming from a company like Sony, and like we say, with the chain of products that we've had to test, it should be producing better than it is. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's an absolutely stonking 4K projector like the 500 was, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching material on it, and it is very, very close to the JVC picture quality in terms of black levels and so on. There's not a hell of a lot between them, and people who write on the forum saying, oh, the Sonys are poor black level, no, I'm sorry they're not poor, they're very, very good, just not JVC good.
Yeah, it's sad that we are in a position at the moment where it is difficult for us to test certain features. I think people are having a go at me about not testing HDR on the X5000. Well, boys, I couldn't. I had no way of accessing any HDR sources to test on that.
And we're waiting 4 weeks for another player to turn up.
Well, I mean, I just don't have it. I mean, hopefully in 3 or 4 months' time, we'll have Ultra HD Blu-ray. But in the meantime, I can't. And unfortunately, obviously, as you just mentioned, Phil, all of JVC's new projectors, 5000, 7000 and 9000, do support HDR. But I was not able to test it. I have seen it, though. I've seen demonstrations of it, which look quite good. But,
yeah, well, this was the other thing that completely flummoxed me when this player turned up from Sony. I mean, it hadn't been open, but I was expecting it to be the clips that we saw at IFA.
Yeah,
on there, which
right?
were Sony Pictures clips, which were HDR clips. I was fully expecting those to be on there, and at least 1 or 2 films to be preloaded onto the thing. Even if it was Smurfs 2, it'd be something to check.
At least it would have been some content.
You know what I mean? It'd be some content to check. And it's not your fault when it comes to the X5000, Steve. I mean, this is what we're highlighting here. It's very difficult to get the clips playing, even in the little media player box things that Mark has hundreds of. I mean, you could send you one of those, and again, it would be hit or miss of whether you would get an HDR clip to play on it, and it wouldn't be metadated if it did play, from what I can work out. So
no, they don't promise HDR playback.
But besides that, I mean, the X5000, I mean, at the price point, it's $4,000. It's a stonking machine for that kind of money.
I mean, bang for buck. That's a hell of a price, because you're getting, you're getting well, okay, it's a full HD projector, but you're getting the E-Shift technology. You're getting reasonably wide color space, 87%. I think got it wrong last week. It's 87%, pretty wide compared to DCI. You're getting HDR support. You've got full fat HDMI 2.0A, 2 inputs for those. You're getting a really well, obviously the JVC blacks, dynamic iris, if you want to use that, which I have to say work quite effectively. And all the other features that you'd expect, lens memory, etc. A really, really well specified projector that can accept 4K, can deliver an experience that's maybe not full native 4K, but pretty close to it. All for $3,999. And that's actually very, very competitive. I mean, there's really nothing else in that price point to compete with it, because the next nearest thing above that would be the 3200. Which is just the same as last year's 300.
Yeah, well,
that's $5,500.
Well, they're not sending the 320 for review because it's
for that
it's
reason.
And I mean, it doesn't have HDR. It doesn't have lens memory. It's missing a few other bits and pieces as well. No dynamic iris. So again, it just makes the X5000 look. And people say, well, wouldn't you go native 4K? Well, actually, native 4K is not the whole picture. Excuse the pun. But it's not. It's not the whole story. The whole story is everything else that goes with it. And to be honest with you, looking at the Sonys versus JVC at the minute, JVC are the better bet.
I think that there's no question about that in my mind. Having spent some time with the 5000 now, I'm thinking I was toying with the idea of maybe getting a 7000. Looking at the specifications, but then I think, well, I can calibrate the 5000, so the fact it's not THX and this sort of stuff is necessarily an issue. It's got a perfectly good CMS that works very well. It was actually very accurate out of the box, which is always good to see, because a lot of people won't get them calibrated. It's not quite as bright as the X7000, but then again, once you've set it up and calibrated it, they're probably going to be similar. It supports HDR. The only area I can really see where maybe it's at a slight disadvantage is that apparently the X7000 and the X9000 do have a much wider color space to get almost DCI, but we'll find out whether that's the case or not when you review it, Phil. But aside from that, you're thinking like, well, that's making the X5000 look even more attractive to me. And obviously it's 1,300 less. So
yeah. So those are the two projectors that we've been looking at. Like we say, the X7000, got word from JVC. There's a slight delay on that, but we will have it before Christmas. Guarantee you that review will be up. It'll probably be the day before Christmas.
Christmas Eve, to be precise.
But yeah, we will have that one up as soon as it comes through, and we've had a decent amount of time spent with it as well. And of course, hopefully I'll still have the VW520, so I'll be able to do some quick head-to-head stuff with it. I've done some head-to-head stuff with the X700, which I have sitting here at the minute. And like I say, I mean, you take native 4K out of it because it's E-Shift against 4K. It's normal viewing distance, Steve. Very difficult to tell the difference between the two, and that's the surprising thing with E-Shift. And I think maybe we've done JVC a disservice in the past with previous versions of the E-Shift, but when you look at it now compared to the native Sonys, and I would say the JVC lens is probably even better. I wouldn't say better, I'd say the equivalent. I know Sony make a big thing about their lens and how it has to resolve 4K, but you put them together and you'd be hard pushed to tell the difference, to be honest. It's other things come into play other than resolution. So people shouldn't get stuck or hung up on just resolution. There's more to it. Yeah. And of course, we've been moaning about not being able to test stuff, which has been out of our hands really when it comes to HDR stuff. But this little product came out of the blue, and we got an email saying, do you fancy one of these for review and have a look at and see what you think? And it's the Murideo Fresco, the 6G pattern generator. We love these little toys. It came from a company in the US, Steve. Like I say, it came out of the blue. I think it came with a recommendation from Joel Silver, who said, give it to these guys to test out and review. Yeah. And gotta say, I've been blown away by this little device because it is so good that the three of us now have one each. And basically, we can test everything bar HDR. We can test,
and that is actually going to be coming too. There is an update coming to add HDR metadata to test for HDMI 2.0A. So that's coming in the new year as well, which is even better. Yeah, we can test. We'll be able to test for anything that's currently being used for display technology, basically.
Yeah, and when we say everything, we mean absolutely everything from refresh rates, so you can go all the way down to, like Mark pointed out the other week there, that 23976 is actually what you need for 24p. So it's not 24p. It's actually just below that. So you can test for that, and you can test for that at every single resolution that you can think of that's current, and that's not just video resolution but also PC resolution. What other things can you test? HDCP 1.4 and 2.2.
Yep. Very handy.
You can
Very
test.
handy.
You can test the EDID and see what it's reporting back through that, and it gives you the full report of what the device is and what the device will accept and what it's saying to you. So you can even test the devices out and see exactly, if the manufacturer's saying something, we can actually go in and test that is the case, and it will accept what it says it will accept when it does the handshake and so on. What else is there in there? Oh, it's
custom resolutions. I used that yesterday.
Custom,
because I'm doing the monitor with a resolution of 2560 by 1440, so I needed a custom resolution. Just stuck the PC software on it. It was easy enough. Complete waste of time, as it turned out, because the pattern generator wouldn't work with Calman RGB. But at least it was an exercise to prove how useful it was. Yeah,
but you can still plug it directly into the device and generate the patterns and so on, and still check the device. It doesn't have to go through Calman RGB for that. I mean, the things that it can do is just absolutely. You can check for almost anything. I think the only thing it doesn't do is pulse. So it doesn't actually check 50 and 60 and 24, but you can use the client to do that.
You can use that with you can do that with the client, yeah. So it does absolutely everything I can think of. I mean, it's a handheld device. So if you're out and about somewhere or just want to do a quick test, you can just plug it in and test whatever you want to test. The fact it can do an EDID read means that you can get all the information about what the display can actually do.
Yeah,
which means we can very quickly in seconds check whether a manufacturer is telling us porkies or not.
Yeah, I mean, I found that.
Ask them.
I found that really useful the other day. I was just playing about with it, just with this BenQ that I've got in for review at the minute, and it was really interesting to see what it would accept, and frequency rates that it would accept, and so on.
Interesting. Did you run the EDID check on the VW520?
I did, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
It does read and write, does it?
Yes, it does.
Try
yeah, because obviously one of the big factors was that JVC's HDMI inputs on their new projectors, they do 18 gigabytes a second, and HDMI 2.0A and 4K at 444, 8-bit 444, but also 12-bit at 420, I think it is. All of which was confirmed by the Fresco. So
yep. No, it's a cracking little device, which is why all three of us now have one, because we couldn't have passed up the opportunity not to have these things, because I think where times are changing and where we've already highlighted where we're becoming issues with projectors and stuff that need feeding from outboard devices in terms of HDR and 4K material, it becomes really useful to see exactly what it will take, what it won't take, and so on. So yeah, I made absolutely fantastic little device that, and it should, now that you've seen the tables that are in the review, how future-proofed and so on. The other thing that I think is brilliant is the fact that because it's a pattern generator, I haven't tested it myself, Steve, but I know you've been doing it, is if you look at some of the high-end displays where we check not only against DCI, but we check the saturation tracking from 75% down in 25% increments. Mm-hmm. In the past, what we've had to do is switch off our very expensive pattern generators that we did use from Senko and revert back to a disc in a disc player to do that, which was a real pain, and it would take about 40 minutes to do it properly, to do it right, because you need to double check that you were set at the right saturation point, so the graph, because if you got halfway through the graph and then mucked it up,
you had to go back and start all over again.
You had to go back and start it again, which would, so it would take about 40 minutes to do this properly, to make sure that you had a good looking graph at the end of it, and you were checking what was happening and checking on screen and so on. Matter of minutes now with the Fresco, because it's a pattern generator, because you can feed it through Calman and tell it what to do.
I'd say actually less than a minute. Once you press play, the measurement button in Calman, it goes ching, 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 ching. It's about 30 seconds. to do it all. It's really quick, and it's just such a, you can do it over and over again, and it's great. In fact, using it in conjunction with Camman Ultima and our clients, it's you can test for anything. So like we talked about it earlier on, but you notice now in the reviews that we actually measure. There's a graph that we run where it actually measures the native color gamut of the display against DCI, so you can see exactly how close to it is, and it gives you a little readout saying percentage measurements. So that's really handy too. And all this stuff is just, it's so quick and easy now. Makes a massive difference. So it'll make us, producing these reports and doing the reviews much quicker.
Yeah, so it rightly won a reference award because we're now using it as our reference device. So I don't think you can say any fairer than that. So, Ed, you can wake up now.
Really? I tell you what, I'm eternally grateful that these things are done via the internet because, at least I've just sort of been pottering through the curious world of online whilst you've talked about pattern generators.
I don't want to know what you've been doing on your own online, to be honest, Ed. Just there's no camera involved in this
Same thing I'm always doing, which is just generally speaking looking at used cars. But,
We spoke about it a little bit before you did the review, but the Audio Technica turntable has gone up now, the the AT-LP5. Looking at the chassis, it looks very, very reminiscent to a direct drive turntable that I used to use back in the day, Ed.
Yes.
Same tone arm, I believe, as well. Or certainly same shape.
Same principles, yeah.
Same principles, the way it was weighted and the auto skip and stuff. It was all the same setup as well, with the weight on the back of the arm and the auto skip to the side. Only difference I could really tell was the platter was a little bit thicker and it had a nice big thick rubber mat on the top and no strobe light. But
well, I mean, I can assure you, having strobed it as a matter of course when it goes in, it's perfect in terms of speed stability at both speeds. This is, if you like, it's completely different. It is a significantly different way of going about making an affordable turntable, and by and large, it's a bloody good one too. The LP5 for 330 quid, it turns up with ARM cartridge, phono stage built in, which can be switched out of the circuit. It's got a USB output for ripping vinyl, which, as I note in the review, people think is a great idea right up until the point where they actually try it. It's a seriously, seriously good piece of equipment. Obviously, the turntable we reviewed prior to this one was £3,500. This is less than a tenth of that, and it really is capable of giving you a good sense of what a good pressing is capable of. And if you have a look in the comments section, the sample's still here. Audio Technica aren't desperately good at actually collecting stuff. I've just been messing about with it. So there's a different cartridge on there. The supplied one's been taken off. 150 quid Grado, which was lying around, has been attached to it, and I got shot the rubber mat and substituted one made out of a sort of acrylic material by a company called the Funk Firm. So that's all up another 220 quid's worth of bits. And I've also stopped using the internal phono stage because reasons. And it's responded positively each time. The really good news is that you can buy this, and if you just used it as it comes out of the box, it will be extremely good. But if you do feel yourself being bitten by the bug, unlike almost anything else at the price point, there's some real stretch to what you can do with it in terms of just eking more performance out of the basic unit.
And it is basically, because I read your review and I thought, whoa, I'm quite tempted here because I like the look of it. It's got an old school look to it, which I really like.
Yeah.
And it comes with everything: cartridge, tone arm. The only thing
Correct.
I need to pay extra for, I think it's an extra 30 quid,
is a lid.
Is a lid. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything else is in the box, good to go. And set up. If you cannot set this turntable up, vinyl is not going to be your friend. It doesn't. I'm afraid it doesn't get any easier than this one. So. It's refreshingly different to the sort of very minimalist simple belt drive designs that it's sort of competing with on price. It's built like a lorry. As I say, there's a useful bit of design sort of upgrade stretch potential to it as well. It's a seriously good product. And if you are looking for a turntable to stick under the tree for Christmas Day, you have to be spending 550 quid before I would recommend anything other than this one.
Of course, if you sat the Christmas tree on top of it, and it'd be a perfectly pitched Christmas tree.
This is true, although I can't help but think, Phil, that 33 RPM is going to be a bit quick to rotate your common or garden Christmas tree. I would counsel at least on using a fake one, because that has a chance of being correctly balanced. But really, you'd be looking for an old broadcast unit with the 16 RPM transcription speed on it. That's a good speed to rotate a tree.
One thing I did notice, there wasn't any obvious start-stop button.
No, it's just you switch the knob. Go up for 33 and down for 45, and in its center position it's off, and there's a hard power switch at the back, so if, for example, you've got a 2-year-old who enjoys switching small switches, it doesn't necessarily spin round when he presses the switch.
So would you still have mini disc? Or I think the question should be, do you still have mini disc?
There is still a mini disc player in the house, because it lives in the bedroom and it plays radio. It's a Sony sort of system, and it plays Radio 4 quite successfully. I don't think there's a functional mini disc left in the house, no. I was quite a big fan of the format. In a rash of feeling wealthy at the time, I bought one of the ES separate mini disc players.
So did I.
With the Trainwreck in them. And the Trainwreck failed, and it was a piece of plastic worth about 5p. But obviously you couldn't buy that piece of plastic on its own. So the quote came back from Sony UK they wanted £187 for a replacement mech, and I just thought, do you know what? I think we're done here.
Yeah,
moved on to solid storage.
Yeah, I even had a head unit in the car, Sony head unit.
Now that's dedication.
Wasn't
so
it?
Did I. Yeah. Back in the late 90s.
Yep. So I had that, and then I sold it to my mate who went down to Birmingham one weekend, and his car got turned over and all got nicked. All the mini disc and the mini disc head unit and stuff.
I would make an honest exception. If anyone out there has a Qualia mini disc Walkman, let me know. And if you're interested in parting with it, I would make you an offer.
Oh, there you go. And it might not be a cash offer either.
Maybe it does. Did you ever see, when Sony did the Qualia line of just different bits and bobs, did you see the mini disc Walkman?
Didn't know they did one, actually.
Unbelievable. I mean, it was just the most ridiculously over-engineered thing. It was a work of absolute beauty. I mean, I wouldn't be interested in actually playing mini discs on it. It's just a minor work of art. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it was 1,500 quid. So they are, as you might imagine, quite rare. But yeah, I'd love one of those, because it was one of the very last pieces of Sony going, yeah, have some of that. And it was just awesome.
Do you guys have the little keyboard so you could type in the names of things on there?
No, if you bought the ES decks, or if you bought the older separates, they came with a remote control the size of a mattress.
Yeah, that's how
which actually had a full keyboard map on it.
That's what I had. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Used that. Well, the thing that I really liked about Minidisc and why I took to it was the easy edit facility. So you could actually do a lot of splicing and editing on it. So stuff that you would use a computer now to do, and software, and go in and do all that, various takes and all the rest. You could do all that within it, which was brilliant. Really well ahead of its time.
It did render one of the very first pieces of sort of Excel code programming sort of thing I ever did. I had worked out an Excel spreadsheet to add in time rather than standard units. Okay, so you could work out the lengths of songs, so you could actually knock them together correctly for compilation cassettes. That's how sad I was.
Yeah, that is really quite
so
sad.
That really is quite nerdy, Ed.
But I made brilliant compilation tapes as a result. They went all the way to the end, no clip-offs, no nothing. Perfect.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up hardware for this week, and we'll be back next with movie reviews. So, Steve, what's at the cinema?
This week we had Victor Frankenstein opening on Friday. which I was going to go and see, but I didn't for two reasons. One, it wasn't playing in my local cinema, but also it got some really, really bad reviews. Sharina gave it 5 out of 10, but I think it got 0 out of 5, 0 stars out of 5 in the Times. Generally,
was that Cosmo Landsman though?
I don't know who did the review actually. I just saw because I was looking through a list of I think it's in the Guardian on Saturday. They just take all the reviews and put them together and show you what it was averaging.
I always feel very sorry for Cosmo Landsman. It's like he's a film critic who doesn't like films. I mean, it's the equivalent of sending, I don't know, someone with severe gastroenteritis to review restaurants.
Curries. Curry houses.
Or someone who can't drive gets the new job of Top Gear presenter. He just seemingly hates films and is compelled to write about them. The man's trapped in a cycle of despair.
Right, well, maybe it was him because it got 0 stars, which I don't think I've ever seen before, so really didn't like it. It also got torn to shreds on Film 2015 by Danny Lee, so eventually I thought, maybe I won't bother, because it kind of looked like it might be fun in the trailers, but basically it looks like it's very derivative.
I think you said last week it looked quite funny in the trailers, and in the trailers I thought, they're playing that quite serious actually. I don't think it's supposed to be funny. It wasn't reviewed well. Sharina said that it was derivative in places. It could, it wasn't exciting or fun enough, and it could done with a jolt of electricity, I think was her exact words. So, yeah, in the end, partly because of that, and partly because it wasn't actually on anyway, so I couldn't. Unless I went to another cinema where I'd have to actually pay, which I wasn't going to do. I think that cinema chain, Wise Film Buyer there, obviously saw that. I thought, well, I'm not buying that in.
So I didn't go, unfortunately. But and I won't be going this weekend because about the only film I think that's being released this weekend is the one that stars Brad Pitt and was directed by Angelina Jolie, the sort of 1960s set film about a marriage breaking down. Which I can't remember what it's called. Something like By the Sea or something like that. Is that what it's called? It's not a laugh, and I think Universal only let her do it so they could get her to do something else for them that they wanted to do, more commercial. But basically, no films are opening, and nothing major is opening between now and Boxing Day because there's
some small science fiction thing launching.
There's a little sci-fi film coming out. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that they've bought up all the screens anyway. All the IMAX screens are bought out for 3 weeks solid. I was going to say Fox there. Disney have bought all those screens up for 3 weeks worldwide. So even if somebody wanted to launch a film,
they could launch films.
They could launch a film, but good luck.
Yeah. Anyway, but that would have been fine if it had been a good laugh and fun. I don't want much. Basically, as long as The Force Awakens is entertaining, I'm going to be happy. It hasn't got to be a masterpiece. It just has to be fun and entertaining.
It just has to be a 2-hour trailer.
Yeah, give me all that for 2 hours.
Didn't it? Really? That's all it needs to be. Don't want any of that slowing down dialogue shit. Just action.
No, I don't mind if it's the odd, because if you watch the original Star Wars, it's got a wonderful pace to it. It's really exciting. And it's genuinely funny in places, isn't it?
It eventually had a good pace to it.
After changing things around. No, but it's just, it is an entertaining and at times quite funny movie with some quite witty dialogue. Again, not via Lucas, has to be said. Didn't Willard Katz and Gloria Hoyk do a rewrite on it for him? You're right. A lot of his friends pitched in. Spielberg, De Palma,
which brings me back to my original point right the way back at the start of this podcast. He got lucky. He had some talent. I'm not saying he didn't have any talent, but he wasn't the super talented filmmaker that Coppola and that make out.
He had a remarkable vision. Because if you think about it at the time in '75, he had a big hit with American Graffiti, and it was a massive hit. Don't forget that. It was a huge, huge hit on a minuscule budget. So he was very bankable at the time, and he could have done anything he wanted to do. And he said, I want to do this science fiction movie. Originally, he wanted to do Flash Gordon, right? But he couldn't get the rights. So, he pitches it to various studios, and not going to get. Universal had first dibs because he did American Graffiti with them, didn't want to know. But it was Alan Ladd Jr. who didn't say, he said, I don't understand what you're talking about or anything, but I believe in you. I think you can deliver something that's going to be interesting. And, to take that idea and then deliver what he did using the effects at the time and effectively, create an effects company to create those effects, and
Yeah.
but admittedly bring in people like John Dykstra, very talented guys who took computers to the next level and did things that
This is
faster.
This is what I meant, though. He was surrounded by all these people.
Yeah, but he had to bring it all together, didn't he? and I think, I'm not going to take anything away from the guy. He made Star Wars, he made American Graffiti, and they're both great films. And but yeah, after that, I think he got severely lost in terms of as a filmmaker. I think he lost interest in it, to be honest. And that just, you can see that with the prequels, where it's all about the technology and not about the filmmaking anymore. And and he's, it's boring, and people look bored doing it. And I think he looked bored directing it.
Where he's been a massive influence on the industry has been on the technical side of things.
Oh, he's fundamentally changed.
He is lauded in the industry as being the guy who really pushed things.
He's fundamentally changed the film industry forever. I mean, that one man has changed everything from non-linear editing to digital capture to digital projection to special effects to CGI. It all goes back to George Lucas. Everything. Yep. Pixar used to be part of Lucasfilm. Now you look at anything that's been influential over the last 20 to 30 years, and you can probably put it back to at some point George Lucas. So from that point of view, he has absolutely changed everything forever. Whether that's a good thing or not necessarily, I don't know always, but no question about it, he's been influential.
Well, that's where he has been the big push, and that comes across when you actually go and see his facilities. It's all technology. Everything is technology, in the way it's hidden away and in the ranch and that kind of thing. But it's the latest, the greatest. He was always thinking about how you push the envelope further. How do you improve things? So in that respect, massively talented. As a filmmaker, he got lucky.
We've kind of got off topic slightly, haven't we, really?
Really? It's very
really, Steve? It's just not like us.
What are we talking about?
How dare we do that? Well, we were talking about the 9 was going to come out because of Force Awakens is out. You got some Blu-rays coming out, which we've had the reviews for all of them anyway at the cinema, and I have no doubt that we're going to have all the Blu-ray reviews on the homepage in the next week.
Yeah, I think basically what's happening is no one's opening stuff at the cinema for obvious reasons, but people are releasing quite a lot of stuff on Blu-ray.
Would that be because it's Christmas, do you think?
Yeah, and Christmas is coming.
I mean, it's just one obvious answer. It's Christmas.
Yeah, it's because Christmas is coming up. Plus, I guess if you don't want to go to the cinema, you can watch one of these Blu-rays instead. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, The Mat, which is a competition prize, as Mark mentioned at the beginning. Mark, you still here?
Yeah.
I just suddenly thought I can't remember the last time I heard your voice.
Me neither.
Well, if you shut up for 5 minutes.
Do you want to read them out, Mark?
No. We also got. You can make me say that because I say it funny, aren't you? Pixels, not pixels as I normally say, and The Gift and Trainwreck, and I've got no interest in any.
Is that about the AVForums podcast?
Yeah. Yes.
And The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes, it's a compendium of episodes.
Interesting documentary.
Interesting fact: Rogue Nation. I almost said Rouge then. Rogue Nation and Man from U.N.C.L.E. Dolby Atmos soundtracks. Pixels in America, Dolby Atmos soundtrack. In this country, rather unusually, Auro 3D soundtrack.
Yeah, there'll be about 2 people can listen to that.
Yeah, just pointing out that's
and you'll be one of them, Steve.
One of them is Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Although
that means I'm going to have to buy the film twice. I don't even want to buy it once.
Why do you have to buy it twice?
If I want to compare the Atmos soundtrack to the Auro 3D soundtrack.
What,
well, that's work, isn't it? You can write that off against tax.
Well, in this particular instance, it will definitely be work. Yeah, it won't be pleasurable.
To be honest, I'd love to get another version of Peter Gabriel's Melt album turned up last week, which makes it my 3rd on vinyl and my 6th otherwise. Which
why do you keep buying it?
I've got a first pressing, I've got 180 gram pressing, and now a 45 RPM half speed master pressing. I've got it on CD, I've got it on SACD, and I've got a remastered CD.
Which album by Peter Gabriel?
Melt, the 3rd one.
Oh, the 3rd one. Yeah, that is a good album.
I'm not going to ask if it's any good. You're obviously quite.
Do you know what? Yeah, it's not bad.
It's a great album. It really is.
It's a great album, but it's probably unnecessary to own 6 versions of it.
You know what's just popped in my head? Next week, right? It's probably going to be the first occasion that all 4 members of the AVForums podcast have gone out of the house.
Well, at the same time.
At the same time.
I stress I am going out the house later on to buy some food.
I assume we all go out of the house at various times, but none of you go to the cinema.
I just wanted to make that point for people listening in who just think these guys for real. How many pressings are that, and what's the difference between them?
Do you really want me to go into
this?
this?
I don't.
No.
Save it for a slow news week podcast, Ed.
Yeah,
we'll come back to it.
What you mean this Monday coming, where
yeah, probably
no one's releasing anything or doing anything as we just wait for an inevitable onslaught of Star Wars.
Yeah,
so
basically. Okay, unfortunately we've run out of time on the AVForums podcast, as we always do. For some strange reason, we were extremely on subject again this week, so there's definitely something in the water. My thanks to Steve Withers.
That look in your eyes is pain in my ass. You know that, right?
Mark Hodgkinson.
Oh, well, maybe we could share a jail cell together.
Ed Selley.
I always spill red wine on my custom-made white shirt.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video. And, of course, you can leave us a rating on iTunes of 5 stars. And if you do that, we will read your names out before Christmas. We'll probably do it on the Christmas-Star Wars special. We'll be kidding. It'll be the Star Wars special. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.